Hello, this is Michael Hogan, and I am with the Real Talk Radio Network. I am the Mo Clean Skies guy. And what is Mo Clean Skies? Well, we are a organization that has been formed to clean up our atmosphere, to focus on legislation, primarily in the state of Missouri, but also at the federal level and in other states as well, to stop what we see as pollution in our skies that's creating all kinds of craziness. For example, one of the things is the trails that we see in the sky. You might call them chemtrails. Some people call them contrails. It's all semantics. It doesn't matter. I want them gone, and I'm sick of it. And it is a major problem. And we've discovered where this is coming from. And it may not be what you thought. It wasn't. It's not what I thought either. But we're also going after geoengineering and weather modification and all these things. Before I go much further, I want to say thanks to Jones Home Improvements for sponsoring this show. JonesHI.com. Go check them out. Kelly Jones, Rob Workman, all those guys over there. Please, I really want to just thank them for sponsoring the show. I mean, they're not doing this for advertisement. They're doing it because they believe in what we're doing. So thank you guys. Appreciate you so much. So I'm going to have a really special guest today. Her name is Reinette Senum. She's with Gen 7. She's also part of an organization that we co-formed, which is called the American Clean Skies Coalition. The American Clean Air Coalition, ACAC. And we formed that with the intent of going after the EPA, that's right, the EPA, to demand that they clean up the aviation fuels and the emissions that are causing, yes, they are causing the trails that we see in the sky. When I got into this cause, this message, this movement, it was because of the trails that I couldn't stand seeing in the sky. And I said, something's got to be done about this. There's something's going on that's not right. Some people on one side will say, well, they're spraying us out of pumps and pipes and they're doing it to kill us all. That's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is people who say, no, it's just water vapor. It's normal. Shut up and just, stop whining. And the truth is in the middle. Okay. It's not, neither one of those people are right. Actually, neither one of them are totally wrong either. So let me explain what it is. The trails in the sky are coming. And here's why I know this. Okay. First of all, I did tons and hundreds of hours of research, and starting with my own flight tracker. And I found out that 100% of them, the planes that we see in the sky, are not coming. They're not planes that are spraying out of pumps and pipes. They're actually coming right out of the emissions of commercial aviation, and really any plane. It could be a military plane. It could be any plane who's flying through super saturated regions of conditions, like certain conditions in the sky that are really wet and cold. This is just atmospheric science. When they fly through these, that produces contrails, right? But what's happening, what's causing these trails to persist is the pollution that's coming out of the emissions. And it's super, super concerning. And that's what's different now than it was in the past, because this pollution is intentionally being left in. I believe, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, because I'm not going to talk conspiracy theory. I'm talking about true facts that I can prove in court. I believe that based on the knowledge and the understanding and the research I've done, that the FAA and the EPA is allowing this to happen to block the sun as a form of climate change mitigation. The same way that planes do spray the stratosphere with particulates to block out our sun. So this is a complicated issue, folks. We're going to get into some deep talk with Reinette about this and what we're doing at the EPA level. The bottom line, again, let me just tell you this. We want all pollution in the sky. We want all, metals. We want all the stuff cleaned up. We don't want any of it. We don't want weather modification. What we're doing at the state level here in Missouri is we have bills that passed the Senate committee hearing. We also have bills that passed the House committee hearing this year to ban geoengineering and weather modification in the state of Missouri. And that's really focusing on intentional solar radiation modification that is happening, that the EPA admits that's happening. It's been happening for a long time. And that is where they spray out of pumps and pipes in really, really high altitudes called the stratosphere. You can't see those planes with your naked eye. You can't see trails up in that area, but they still are. They still have plans, and they're doing research up there as we speak, as a form of climate mitigation. That's one thing. The other thing is weather modification in the form of cloud seeding. That's a whole separate issue, and that is where smaller planes fly into cumulus clouds with the intent of producing rain. Like they basically spray seeds, which is why it's called cloud seeding. They spray these particulates of silver iodide into the clouds to give the vapor something to form onto, and then it becomes heavy and it turns into a droplet of water, which falls to the ground. The problem is that is a toxic situation. Silver iodide is toxic to the environment. It is toxic to aquatic life, things like that. So this is a big, big thing. When I got into this, I didn't realize how much of a huge elephant that I'm trying to eat one bite at a time. But that's the reason why, okay, I'm going at the state level for those two things, but I'm also having to go after a federal level to get them to clean up the aviation emissions that are producing these trails in the sky. Let me explain that real quick again. And that is the emissions are doped with the fuels are doped with all kinds of high levels of sulfur dioxide. And in the emissions are detected this sulfur dioxide, which turns into sulfuric acid, also metals coming out of the emissions, and black carbon, which is soot, basically. And these particulates coming out of the emissions of aircraft are the seed, kind of like what I was talking about with cloud seeding. They're the seed that becomes that the water vapors and ice crystals form around, which creates these trails that are persisting all day long in some cases and turning into what's called cirrus clouds. And yes, cirrus clouds come out of planes by and large. If you talk to any meteorologist about, hey, where does cirrus clouds come from? Not all of them are natural. A lot of them, and these days, it's majority of them, I would say, are coming out of planes. Okay, and so there are ways to address this, and we are demanding that the EPA. We already know, we know the facts. We're ready to take them to court. So if we're doing that, we're bringing the evidence, okay? And we have evidence that says that they have allowed these high levels of sulfur dioxide to come out of commercial aviation, and I believe they do this with intent to have some kind of climate change mitigation. Do you realize that all of our government, every form of our government, every department, and in all governments across the world have climate change mitigation policies, because that's what they talk about when they go to the Paris Climate Accords, or when they go to the World Economic Forum, or when they go to the G7. They do talk about climate change a lot, okay? And this is a globalist thing. It's a power grab. It's about money and power, and they do these crazy, stupid things that say, well, we have to block out our sun in order to lower our temperature, and they'll do it in any way possible. And they're accomplishing this through planes that actually do spray in the stratosphere, high altitudes, but they're also accomplishing this through commercial aviation. Okay, and you can look at that up with Dr. David Keith, who's one of the geoengineering scientists behind geoengineering and solar radiation modification out of the University of Chicago. And he admits that, yes, we want to spray, 1 million tons of this sulfur dioxide. We call it sulfuric acid because when it releases in the atmosphere, it turns into sulfuric acid. We want to do that 100 million tons, okay, a year. And it's going to kill 10,000 people a year, probably. Great. That's great. Not great, actually. Not cool. You should be arrested. You shouldn't even be taken seriously. So the other thing is he's saying, but commercial aviation is already doing it for us too. He said that specifically when Mexico decided they were going to ban geoengineering for this whole country. He said, you can't do that because it's already coming out of every commercial aviation plane. Sulfuric acid is coming out of every plane every day, all day long. And so we've really done the work, folks, on this, and we really are going after the correct sources. We're hitting at the state level, we're hitting at the federal level, and we're taking this to court. And we're going to give you the details how you can get involved in this and sign the petition. Go to American Clean Air Coalition.org and you'll find that. You can also go to mocleanskies.org and find that information of how you can sign the petition to help us really push this at the federal level. But also just follow us, because we're also doing these. We're talking to state legislators. We've got these bills introduced. We're really working hard to do something about this. So stay with us, folks. So Reinette Senum is right around the corner. Hello, this is Michael Hogan, and I'm on the Real Talk Radio Network. And man, I have an amazing guest with me, Reinette Senum. Hey, welcome, Reinette.
Hi, Michael. Great to be joining you today.
Yeah, what an honor. It's such a, I'm just, I actually have never met you in person, but I feel like you're family now.
Yeah, I agree.
We've worked together just a short time, but we're working on a major push, as I mentioned in my first show, or my first segment, to the EPA. Tell the audience about this, Reinette. Nobody can say it better than you can.
Well, essentially, a few years ago, like many of the folks out there, I was very concerned about the streaks in the sky. I've been concerned about them for now nearly 20 years. And so 3 years ago, after COVID kind of cleared up a little bit, I went back to my fight against geoengineering, and I raised a bunch of money, over $50,000, and hired a team of constitutional attorneys out of Houston, Texas, to actually go out there and take to court the perpetrators. Well, long story short, the narrative that I was familiar with, that we're all mostly familiar with, didn't hold water. And I really had this kind of dark night of the soul and had to step back and go, well, then what is going on? And, and when I really started to look at it, it was not a completely 100% inaccurate story, but there's a lot of really missing or misconstrued elements. And so around this time, I had been connected to Jim Lee of Climate Viewer, who is one of our lead petitioners now on this petition for rulemaking. And I knew of him, but I never really got into his information and his narrative and his treasure trove of now like 20 years of evidence and data and publications and science and so on. So I started working with him, and the thing that is amazing is that COVID changed me, like it changed a lot of us. And
Yeah.
by the time I got through COVID, I no longer just gave over my agency and said, okay, I will capitulate to whatever talking head who is a self-proclaimed expert in whatever respective field. And so I started looking at his evidence, and it held water, and it held water, and it held water. And I'm like, okay, this is the stuff that I can take to court. This is the stuff that clarifies there's a conflation going on in our skies, and nobody is saying that geoengineering and weather modification is not happening. We're not saying that at all. Nobody believes
Quite
that.
the opposite.
We're very much the opposite, right?
Yeah.
But what we are saying is that there's a conflation going on, that as long as we continue to allow this conflation of understanding what's happening in the skies, we're never going to be actually able to address the issues and get our healthy and clear skies back. So yes, geoengineering is happening. However, it's happening not in the troposphere where the planes are flying and where those trails are laid. It's happening, or in the troposphere. It's happening in the stratosphere, which is much warmer and higher. You're not going to see the planes. You're not going to see the streaks in the sky. And even if they are laid, it's too far away, and it's just not the right type of atmosphere and conditions. And what is happening, the streaks in the sky are happening. They're not just ice crystals, as the EPA and Lee Zeldin have claimed. There's a whole host of soot and metals, and creates sulfur and so on, with sulfur dioxide. This is both happening, and while it's not just ice crystals, no, it's not just clean and perfectly healthy. It is also unintentionally, and I do say that in quotations, it is unintentionally altering the weather. It is a form of geoengineering, which is clearly laid out in our petition for rulemaking, and that is very much in a nutshell.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm in this cause and in this effort, and the reason why people are even listening right now, well, a lot of them are just tuning in, going, "What the heck did I just stumble into?"
I'm sure
they're driving in St. Louis, like, "What is this again?" But it's because of the streaks and the trails in the sky, right?
Right.
And it is extremely concerning. And you can't tell. I don't care who says this, but you can't tell me that this is normal. You can't tell me that this is it's been this way all along. I know, because I was a kid and I used to look up constantly. There was no cell phones when I was a kid, you know that, and we all we did was look up. I would track. I remember seeing contrails, and I
Mhm.
was fascinated about contrails when I was a kid, but they always dissipated fast.
Yeah.
Today, the trails do not. It's on certain days, right? They don't dissipate fast, and so, and I'm really glad I have to say that you mentioned Jim, because when I started down this rabbit trail of trying to find out, okay, what is going on in our sky? Like, what is going on with these streaks? Is this nefarious? Because I was told by the leaders in this movement who have been talking about this, and they have their documentaries and have this and that. I'm not going to call them out by name, but I was led down that path to say, oh, every trail I see in the sky is from an undercover or military plane that's
Right.
literally spraying us with pumps and pipes, and you turning on a button, and it really angered me, and it really angers the public to hear that, because that is an assault, right? That
Oh,
is a direct assault. As I started to do my own research, I got a simple flight tracker, and I had heard about Jim, and I was told, listen, do not talk to Jim. He's the devil. Like, I'm not kidding you. Like, and I was like, oh, because I actually saw him on the high wire with Del Bigtree. And
right.
when I saw him, I thought, wow, man, that guy seems to know what he's talking about. And that makes sense. And I sent
Right.
that to some people that I knew, and they were like, oh, no, no, that do not talk to Jim. Do not listen to him. And then I started doing my own research. I got my own flight tracker, and I started going, I did like 100 flights. And I was like, 100% of those were commercial airlines. 100%.
Well, I had similar. So I was turning towards Jim, but I just couldn't wrap my mind around. I was like, "Wait, no, no, this can't be true. That it's commercial aviation and military, and it's only when the atmospheric conditions are just right." And then a gentleman by the name of Jeff Ray came along, who is a meteorologist, and he happened to
Uh-huh.
live very close to where I live. And I'm
Yeah.
only 20 minutes from where I was raised as a child, sailing every day, looking at the skies. I had the same experience as you did. Didn't
Yeah.
see the streaks, not like that, these persistent contrails. So Jeff says to me, Reinette, I'm a meteorologist, and I'm going to let you know I'm watching your work and I want to assist you. Basically, worked in the Air Force. I worked on an aircraft carrier. My job was to look at the Appleman chart every
Yeah.
day. Radiosonde data is
Yeah.
released. Radiosonde is released by weather balloon. It collects all the
Yeah.
data in the atmosphere. I'm going to tell you whether or not and what you're going to see at every elevation, whether it's be persistent long trails
Yeah.
or short or none. So he did that for 3 weeks. And for three
Yeah.
weeks, and he told me he had to do it. His job was to identify where the jets could take off from the aircraft carrier and land without a
Yeah.
persistent contrail showing the enemy where the ship was. So
Bingo.
so nonetheless,
Yeah.
I was like, "That's a job." Well, after 3 weeks, he was spot
Yeah.
on, and I was like, "Oh
Huh.
my god."
Yeah.
So I couldn't deny it, and again, this is why I say we all have to go through this dark night of the soul, because not only did I believe a particular narrative that is not 100% incorrect or correct, but I was also going out there and pushing it and taking a lot of flack. I was in the city council. I was
Yeah.
mayor. The flack that I took, and I was pushing this and standing my ground, and it's again, I'm not saying the geoengineering and weather modification is not happening. It
Yeah, it
has been,
is.
and it is, but
Yes.
it's not the streaks. Those programs are invisible to the naked eye,
Yeah.
full stop.
We're going to explain more of this on our next segment. We're running out of time right now in this segment, but we're going to explain to you what we're talking. We're going pretty deep here, and I know that you're driving your car, taking the kids to soccer games, and you're going, what exactly are they talking about? We're talking about cleaning up our skies. Mo Clean Skies is who I represent. As you know, this is the Mo Clean Skies guys show. And so we're wanting to clean up our sky and our atmosphere, and what is happening that human beings are dumping all kinds of pollution in our skies. Some of it is intentional, some of it is probably unintentional, but regardless, we have to clean up our atmosphere, and that's what this is about. Stay with us, because you really want to hear what's going on about this. We're going to explain more on the next segment. Stay with us. Hello, this is Michael Hogan, and I'm on the Real Talk Radio Network, and I'm the Mo Clean Sky guy. And I'm here with Reinette Senum, and you heard us on the last segment talking about a lot of deep dive stuff that probably you're like, what in the world are they talking about? So we're going to try to keep this so that the folks can understand what we're talking about. Number one, okay, is that the reason why I have a show and the reason why you want to hear it is because you're looking up at the sky and you're going, what the heck? What is going on here? And you're hearing all these different people from both sides, one side saying this and the other side saying the opposite. And you know what? We're going to bring the two together. We're hoping to. And we mean business, folks. Let me explain what we're doing at the state level, okay? Mo Clean Skies has, we just passed in the Senate committee in Missouri our bill to ban geoengineering and weather modification. We also passed two bills in the House that we combined as one, passed the House committee hearing, and unfortunately ran out of time. But we're going to take this fight again next year. And what are we fighting? We're fighting against the intentional blocking of our sun. And there are nefarious companies, there is a climate change agenda, okay, of people who want to block our sun by spraying particulates in the stratosphere. That is real. Even the EPA came out, Lee Zeldin said that's real, and it has history of government funding, things like that. We want to say no to that, and we're doing that at the state level and at the federal level, but really in Missouri, we're taking it to the state, and we're kind of following the lead that Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee have already done. So we'd like to get all 50 states on board to say no to that. We also want to say no to cloud seeding and any other type of weather modification. And so that's part of our bill. Let me tell you what's not part of our bill. I walked into the House committee hearing and I said, let me tell y'all. And y'all is a term from my past. I'm Texan from birth. So let me tell you what we're not talking about. And I said, we're not talking about chemtrails here. We're talking about the things that they spray in the stratosphere. We're talking about cloud seeding. But guess what? The streaks that we see in the sky, I can guarantee you, I can prove to you that that's not those. That's not stratospheric aerosol injection, and it's not cloud seeding. So what is it? What we've discovered is that is coming directly out of commercial aviation by and large, or any jets that fly in cruising altitude around, let's just say cruising altitudes between 18,000 and 40,000 feet, okay? They're flying. What happens is these planes, let's just say commercial, because by and large you're going to see mostly commercial jets. Like you're going to see it's Delta, it's Sun Country, you're going to see it might be a DHL or FedEx, and they're leaving these trails, and only on certain days. So when the planes fly, see, conditions matter, okay? So when planes fly through what's called ice supersaturated regions, these are basically wet pockets in the sky, and they're extremely cold. Now, no matter what degree the temperature is on the ground, it might be 100 degrees where you're at. It could still be extremely ice cold in the troposphere, which is cruising altitude. That's atmospheric science, okay? I don't have to explain that. That's just a fact, okay? So also there's times when it's extremely wet. So it's going to be ice pockets. So planes can fly through these ice pockets and fly out of them too into dry pockets. And that's why sometimes you see a trail turn on and it looks like it's turning off. But on certain days you see this where the conditions in that cruising altitude is really right for this type of things to happen. So, but that's not just it, because so what happens when these hot jets go through these ice supersaturated regions, what's coming out of the emissions is what becomes the seed or the nuclei that creates, that basically the ice crystals form onto and creates these persistent clouds. And what they call them, when I say they, I mean meteorologists and pilots, they're calling it cirrus clouds, okay? Did you know that cirrus clouds, by and large, are made by planes? They are. And I didn't know this before, but the meteorologists don't come out and say that, but it's a fact. They'll tell you that if you ask them, I think, if they're honest. But what you're seeing is aviation-induced cloudiness, okay? So this is a really important thing that we must address, okay? But we can't address this at the state level because states can't do anything about commercial aviation or fuels. So that's when a group of professionals like myself, of course, Reinette, have got together and formed the American Clean Air Coalition, okay? And we have taken this fight to the EPA. So there you go. I'm kind of giving the explanation of this. Reinette, take it from there. What are we doing at the EPA?
Well, you did an excellent job, by the way. So, yeah, so we've sent in on May 4th, the EPA received a mailed copy, signed mailed copy with all of the petitioners' names. For this is basically under the Clean Air Act, Section 231. And this petition is called the Aviation Aerosols Emissions, Aviation Induced Cloudiness, and the Endangerment of Public Health and Welfare Petition. And what we're asking for essentially is an endangerment finding. Why? Well, because once the EPA gives an endangerment finding, everything else kind of follows after that, right? Then they talk, in partner with the FAA and with the Department of Transportation, and we also have requested action items as well. And so these requested action items are, of course, we want this endangerment finding, but we also want them to change the standards of the emissions and fuel standards to have it clean, so we don't have sulfur, because sulfur is in the jet fuel, and it does create more persistent contrails, otherwise known as aviation-induced cloudiness. And then we also are asking them, another requested action is to coordinate with the FAA and the Secretary of Transportation. And so, and there's a whole host of other things, like we want them to monitor the 5 busiest airports for the first year, then expand beyond there. And so what we're doing is, this is not going to 100% clear the skies, but these are the biggest steps we can take right now. They're going to be the fastest, most effective and efficient. And that is, we are also asking for humidity sensors on the planes. Why? Well, very similar to when you're flying on a plane, like, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have to, buckle in, or, there's going to be turbulence ahead. The planes will go up or they'll go down. They'll go up or down, in the atmosphere to avoid the turbulence. Well, we're asking that the airplanes be required by the EPA and the FAA to have humidity sensors, so that when they start reading these ice supersaturated regions, as you said, the ISSRs, they can go up or they can go down, and all the other planes know to avoid those areas. And what does that do? That allows them to avoid the area that is going to lay that persistent contrail, that aviation induced cloudiness, that is dimming the sun, that is having deleterious effects on our health, our environment, our economies, our crops, our forests, our aquarian life. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's not like, it's just little clouds, it's no big deal. The proof is in the petition. We have over 170 citations saying this is the harm and that is happening. And you, EPA, since the creation of the Clean Air Act in 1963, have never, ever, ever regulated, the commercial aviation as you should have. It's kind of given it a free hall pass. And we're asking to actually regulate it as it has regulated all the other industries.
Yeah. Basically, when the Clean Air Act came down, they really focused on carbon dioxide, of course, because, the globalist mantra is that carbon's going to kill us all, and carbon footprint, this part, and they completely ignored everything that's non-carbon. That's all the pollution that's coming out of planes, and the biggest one is sulfur and sulfur dioxide. And this isn't coming from us. This is from all of the scientists that have been studying this forever, and they're the ones that point out that it's sulfur coming out of the planes. And so here's an example of what we're talking about, is that my diesel truck, when I fill up, even at the tank or even at the gas tank, it actually has a green sign, a sticker. Have you ever noticed this?
Yeah.
It says ultra low sulfur, and it says the EPA regulations is 15 parts per million for this diesel truck, or a tractor, might be a tractor, same fuel, Well, airlines have essentially the same type of kind of a diesel or kerosene type of fuel. Their limitations are 3,000 parts per million.
Yeah.
So if you're just a rational person looks at this and goes, if you're going to lower the emissions for trucks, or the fuel content of sulfur in the trucks and the tractors, isn't air traffic much more likely to pollute our sky than a tractor?
Well, so that's just it. There's a difference. Whereas the ground transportation, it's right there. It's very concentrated, especially
Yeah.
highways, industrial areas, and so on. But what we now have evidence of is that they believed at one time that commercial aviation, that jet exhaust, that sulfur, and so on, would just drop down, and rain over us over time and kind of dissipate. Well, now they have evidence. There's these
Yeah.
onion-like structures that only come and originate from jet exhaust, and it's going
Yeah.
up into the stratosphere. Why is that a problem? Well, there's a Montreal Protocol, which the whole world, all these nations have signed on to say, hey, we got to stop doing this because having this particulate matter and so on going up into the stratosphere is depleting the ozone. It's destroying it.
Yeah.
So ends up that we found out that commercial aviation, that jet exhaust is being found going way more than 18
Yeah.
kilometers up, and is going into the stratosphere, and not raining out like in a week or 2 weeks, or falling to the ground, but staying up there for years and years and burning away at the ozone. So this is
Yeah.
so yes, maybe it's not as much producing as much as ground transportation or industries or even shipping, but it's going up and lofting into the stratosphere, which is having a
Yeah.
whole other chemical chain reaction up there. And so this is what we're trying to say to people: like, this is not a big deal. And the other thing is the sulfur that's coming out of the fuel creates sulfur dioxide, which then in turn creates acid rain. And what we do know is that
sulfuric acid.
Sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid. And what we know is that when it does that, when it creates the sulfuric acid, it hits the soil and creates another chain reaction and releases the naturally found aluminum that is bound to essentially sand, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is that then it allows that aluminum, which is the third most abundant mineral in the world. People believe aluminum is not found naturally. It's like, oh yeah, it's in everything in your soil. But what it does, it releases it from the silicate, and it is now allowing it to be bioaccumulate into the crops, into the trees, into the waterways, into the evaporation cycle. And so it's having huge detrimental effects. And it's just it's the Northern Hemisphere, by the way. The Northern Hemisphere has 80 to 90% of all commercial aviation. And we now know also, which is in our petition, there is a bifurcation that is happening. The Northern Hemisphere is now a different color. It's milky, right? It's a milky kind of blue versus the Southern Hemisphere that does not have the commercial aviation. So we have two different colored hemispheres now because of what's happening with commercial aviation.
And I want to go a little bit deeper on the effects that's happening to our soil, because every time you can do a soil sample, no matter where you are, you're going to get high levels of aluminum, and it is getting worse and worse and worse. And I think I've heard this, and I don't know, I don't like to share things that I can't prove, but that Monsanto's coming out with aluminum resistant seeds. We'll talk about that in the next segment, and then maybe you can give us some of your insights on that. But basically, we're just kind of, we got all this aluminum. We got to find a way to just live and just deal with it. But I'm not okay with any of this. And you know what? I haven't ever been like an environmentalist, like tree hugging. But I'll tell you what, I love our environment. I love the trees. I love clean air, and we all need to be environmentalists. We absolutely do. If we want to, to have a future for our children and our grandchildren, the way that we had when we were kids, we have got to fight for this. And no matter, this is not a red or blue, or it's not a partisan issue. We all need to breathe clean air or else. And so we have to fight for these things. So stay with us, folks. I got one more segment coming up, and I can't wait because we're gonna go a little bit deeper into what we're talking about. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. This is Michael Hogan, and I'm on the Real Talk Radio Network. And I have to say right quick is that Jones Home Improvements, joneshi.com. If you're up in the St. Louis area or surrounding, or even, if you don't even think you're close enough, call them. I'm going to put their number on the screen for the people who are watching, but I know you're on the radio. But joneshi.com. Kelly Jones over there. And Rob Jones, Rob Workman works with Kelly. Rob actually testified in our House committee and in our Senate committee because he's what's called a building biologist. I've never heard of that. But what he does is he goes into houses and into just buildings to kind of look at the radiation levels, and he tells the owners what they need to do because he has been personally injured by this, severely, and he has a personal testimony, and he shared that in our committee hearings, how that relates to some of the geoengineering things that we're trying to ban and stop, because it's not just the pollution. We're also looking at, you know, high levels of radiation that we're dealing with too, and it all has to be dealt with. So Jones HI, they're not just a sponsor; they're partners and they're friends of ours and supporters. And thank you so much for you guys for supporting what we're doing. So I have Reinette Senum with me, and we are talking really into about what we're doing, what's going on in our atmosphere, why we're involved in this, and we're talking about the EPA petition. We're actually sent a petition to the EPA, and it's a petition for rulemaking, and it is a demand that they do something about what is coming out of commercial aviation, basically the fuels, the emissions. We know that they know, okay, that this is a major problem. Sulfur dioxide is a huge problem. Not only sulfur dioxide, but anything, you know, it might be black carbon, metals, the things that are coming out of commercial aviation, 100,000 flights per day. And it's growing fast. Okay, it's not going to get any better, folks. We're demanding that the EPA take a look at this, and not only take a look at it, but do something about it and stop the streaks in the sky, stop blocking the sun, and stop polluting our air and our soil. And so we were talking about aluminum in our soil and different things, and people are just not aware. This is a very complicated issue, but all of this stuff that's raining down on us, if you're doing soil samples or if you're doing water samples or things like that, I did a rainwater sample and it came back with high levels of aluminum, you know, and out of my backyard. Okay. Things are raining down on us, and it's you know, it's because of the pollution that's going on. It's happening. And we have to get a handle on this. And or else we're just not going to have an ecosystem much longer. It's really disturbing to see what's happening. So all of this pollution is going up. It's coming, you know, eventually it does come down. And it's, when you talk to all the farmers, they're talking about how I've heard that this is, that Monsanto is coming out with, or has already come out with, aluminum resistant seeds. I looked it up and I couldn't find, you know, you're going to find that that's conspiracy theory, right? Tell me, what are your thoughts on that?
It's actually not. In fact, I think it's one of the gentlemen on Climate Viewer, Jim Lee's channel on Telegram, was talking about actually Monsanto does have these aluminum resistant seeds, and specifically the aluminum levels, interestingly enough, in the southern hemisphere are much higher in the soil than here in the northern hemisphere. So there's probably a two-prong approach. One is that they have to mitigate for this down in the southern hemisphere. So these seeds mitigate that conveniently, but also here in the United States, we also know that our aluminum levels are getting higher and higher. And that's not just because of commercial aviation. It's not just because of geoengineering. It's also just industries and pollution in general. Again, when acid rain is created, it releases the aluminum from the naturally found aluminum in the soil that's bound to a silicate, to sand.
Yeah.
And to let people know, we have huge, dust storms coming from the Sahara. So we have Saharan dust that is carrying aluminum and the silicate together. I mean, it goes around the whole entire world. And there's something that was very humbling for me. We spent thousands of dollars with our Save Our Skies initiative, and we actually went out there and we tested rainwater samples and snow samples and so on. And we also found very high levels of aluminum. But it was after the fact that we found out, wait a second, when you go to test for the aluminum and all these other type of, metals like cobalt, when you go to test for all of them, you have to also test for the silicate, because it's a 1-to-3 ratio. It's 1 part aluminum and it's 3 parts silicate. If you do not test for the silicate and get that 1-to-3 ratio, you won't know if those numbers are exorbitant or not. So we have all these people around the world, including the so-called experts, saying, look at how high these levels of aluminum are. Did you test for the silicate? If you did not test for the silicate, you aren't going to know if this is naturally found aluminum in the soil as you would expected, or if this is coming from other sources. And so we have all of these people doing the rainwater samples, and the rainwater samples we paid for that we thought we were going to be taking to court for a different case would never, ever have standing. Ever. So pretty much no one out there, including the pundits who are pushing this information, writing books about it, getting contributions for their organizations, never, ever test for the sand. And they can't tell you if it's naturally derived or if it's man-made.
I think based on what we're all talking about right now is that we're not interested in things that we can't prove. We're just not. When we're talking about conspiracy theories, we're going to go to court if we have to with the EPA. and we better come with the goods, right?
Well, and that's the thing. So this is what I say to people is that, again, COVID changed everything for how I look at things, right? I just don't take, whatever pundit or talking head says I know I'm the expert. But what really changed was not just that, how COVID shifted me in my mind, but also when I started looking through the lens of we're taking this to court. What has standing, what does not, what is provable in the court of law? And I know how some people are saying, oh, this is the Republic and these courts are, bar attorneys and they're completely twisted and unethical. I understand all that, but nonetheless, looking through the lens of what is provable in the court of law, and that shifted everything around this narrative. And what we ultimately were pursuing the truth, and the truth is a combination of both of these. Like, chemtrails don't exist. Yes, they do. We're not one or the other. We're actually kind of in the middle. There's a little bit of truth to both of them, and there's a little bit of untruths in both of these scenarios. And so that changed everything. And so everything that we've been talking about right now on your show, Michael, can be proven in a court of law. And essentially, this petition for rulemaking is the legal argument and the evidence that we've brought forth to the EPA saying we're going to give you a chance and we must do this. The Administrative Procedure Act, the APA, requires that you give the agency the information, the time to respond and to actually respond to your requested actions. Say, okay, yes, we'll give you a docket number, we'll open this up to public comment, and then we'll make our decision. So we have to go through that process. If we don't go through that process and submit a petition for rulemaking as we have, then when we go to a court of law, the judge will say, well, did you give them a chance to adjust? And if we say no, they'll throw us out and we start from scratch.
Right. So we're following the procedures to the letter of the law to make sure we don't hit these hurdles. So I'm going to take this back down to the public understanding here. We are tired of seeing the streaks in the sky. Are you folks? Have you looked up? Have you noticed? We are going after the EPA. And I mean that we have given them a petition for rulemaking. They have 180 days to respond. We are talking to attorneys right now about if they don't give us what we ask for, we will take it to court. Okay. That's our right as Americans. We're not making a threat. It's just that's how the American process works. And so this is a very serious issue. We actually uncovered the truth behind this. And listen, folks, we want you to get behind this. We have a petition for the petition, which is kind of funny to say, but we actually have a petition where you can get behind the petition. So here's what I want you to do is go to AmericanCleanAirCoalition.org, AmericanCleanAirCoalition.org, and sign the petition. Right now, we just started this, so we have about 3,700 signatures right now.
And that's a citizen's petition. That is a petition that you actually sign. Our petition is a legal argument, requested actions, and the evidence.
So folks are always asking, how can I get involved? This is it. We need your support because volume matters. When the people speak out, that's when the EPA, that's when Lee Zeldin comes out and actually talks about geoengineering, right? He feels pressure. He goes on to talk shows, but then he also says, well, but then you have this water vapor that's coming out of commercial emissions. And we're like, no, sir, we're not going to accept that. So we know that we know what's happening. We know how to fix it. And we're going to demand that the EPA address this issue, or else we're never, ever, ever going to see an end to the trails in the sky if we don't go after the right source. And this group is actually going after the right source like no one has ever done before. If you listen to these talking heads about chemtrails and this and that, they have no solutions, okay? Yep. This is the solution, and it may not sound like what you thought it was going to be, but we are going after the facts, and we know what needs to be done to address this issue. So, man, we're out of time, Reinette, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to have you back, but we could literally talk for days. We'll resume this in the future. But, guys, go to AmericanCleanAirCoalition.org and just follow us. Thank you so much, Reinette, for being here. And
thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.